Thanks for tuning in. I'm Darrious Hilmon, sitting in for a vacationing Andy Zopp, and this is Chicago Newsroom 2.0. This week, Sufyan Sohel and Swathi Staley join me to discuss how nonprofits are bracing for closer scrutiny from the Trump administration, and the not-so-quiet on-deck circle awaiting 80-year-old Senator Durbin's decision on whether or not he'll seek a sixth term. On a special roundtable, notable leaders Christa Hamilton, Kelwin Harris, and Monica Woodson join me to discuss how they are leading their organizations with special care and intention during these incredibly turbulent times. I'll sit one-on-one with Borderless magazine's Flores to discuss the ongoing constitutional crises created by the president's refusal to return U.S. citizen Abrego Garcia to American soil, despite being directed by the Supreme Court to do so. I'll also sit in conversation with the co-founders of reCentered Partners, Leung and Stephen McClain, to discuss best practices in organizational efficiency. We got lots to cover, and it all begins on the other side of a short break. Stay with us.
Every community has a story, a pulse, a voice waiting to be heard. At CAN TV, we bring these stories to life, from the heart of Chicago to your living room. Join us in supporting hyper-local television. Your backing helps us cover what matters directly in our communities, unfiltered and upfront. Help tell the important stories of our communities. Become a program underwriter today.
One-on-one this week, we turn our attention to a deeply troubling international case with serious human rights implications. Abrego Garcia, a Salvadoran man and legal U.S. resident, was deported from the United States to El Salvador in March of 2025, despite a 2019 court order that barred his removal due to credible fears of persecution upon return. At the time of his deportation, he was residing in Maryland with his wife and children, all of whom are U.S. citizens, and he was complying with regular check-ins with the U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE. The Trump administration presently describes his deportation as an administrative error, but the consequences of that error are anything but minor, as Garcia remains imprisoned without trial in El Salvador. This case raises urgent questions about international diplomacy, the U.S. government's responsibility to protect its residents abroad, and the broader implications for immigrants with dual ties to countries enforcing aggressive security crackdowns. Joining us now is Flores, the deputy editor of Borderless magazine. Hillary's been closely following Garcia's story and the growing concerns over how the U.S. is or isn't responding. Hillary, welcome to the program. It is so great to have you here.
Likewise.
My goodness.
Oh my gosh.
Your first visit with us.
Right.
In the news of the day right now, it's great to have you here.
Likewise.
We look forward to having you on more often. But your very first appearance with us is about this international story with Chicago implications. Mm-hmm. So help me, because I said to you as we were prepping, I've heard a lot of, even with the news sources, he was in the States when he was deported, he was visiting in El Salvador when it happened. Walk us through the timeline of how Mr. Garcia went from a routine family life to being imprisoned in El Salvador's most notorious facility. Now, they've moved him, but they put him initially in their most notorious facility. Walk our viewers through that timeline.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're prepared here with our notes because, as you mentioned, it's a really complicated case, Darrious. I'll start off with just that brief timeline, as you mentioned. Let's just halt back to why he set foot in the U.S. first. He escaped political violence from El Salvador. That is what we know. He said that he received gang threats, specifically from Barrio 18. Now, something to note here is Barrio 18 is the main rival of MS-13. Let's jump to 2012. In 2012, he entered the U.S. according to court documents. That's what county police department laid out. 7 years later, 2019, that's where incidents start. So he was detained with 3 people in a Home Depot parking lot in 2019. Officers at the Prince George's County Police Department said the men were loitering, but his attorney said otherwise. Now, his attorney said they were actually seeking work as day laborers.
Sure.
Later on, let's walk into what he's wearing, because that's another key point here that we have to highlight. Mr. Garcia was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and a hoodie with rolls of money covering the eyes, ears, and mouth of the presidents on separate denominations. The officers indicated that, this is indicative of the Hispanic gang culture just because of what he was wearing. Now, lawyers dismissed this information given to police against him as just hearsay because he was never convicted of any criminal offense. That judge over that 2019 case, as we mentioned, said there wasn't enough evidence to support these allegations, these ties to gangs. And in October of 2019, actually, they granted him a withholding of removal order. So what does that mean? That is really separate than seeking asylum, very different.
Sure.
It prevented him to be sent back to El Salvador, and this was all during Trump's first term.
The irony.
Yeah, and let's jump forward now. As you were mentioning, 2025, this year, a lot of events unfolded as well. Abrego Garcia was detained by ICE during a routine traffic stop, and this was in Maryland. 3 days later, what you mentioned, he was deported to El Salvador and incarcerated in the CCOT mega prison. The Trump administration, though, called this an administrative error. We jump a month later. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the government must facilitate, as you mentioned, his return to the U.S.
The Supreme Court.
Yeah. And then, just days later, April 20th of 2025, that's when we hear from Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen. He visits El Salvador, meeting with Mr. Garcia and calling for his immediate release. Though, despite these efforts, the Trump administration maintains that it lacks the authority to facilitate his return, and it continues to allege without any evidence that he has ties to criminal organizations.
And this is also the same scenario where the president of El Salvador sat in the White House and went, my hands are tied as well. I can't return criminals,
Correct.
Nobody's been convicted of being one, back to the country in front of the president. And I think for anyone watching, we would go, but between the two of you sitting right here,
Right.
I'm sure. So how is this current state of affairs, this blatant violation of one of the few times in history, modern history at least, that the Supreme Court agreed, what was it, 9-0?
Yeah,
To
I
get
believe
this
so.
Supreme Court to agree on anything. Is it unfair to use the word, this has now pushed us into a constitutional crisis?
I don't think it's unfair when we analyze this information, and especially because, again, we're dealing with what the Trump administration said it was an administrative error. So the fact that our administration also
Said
highlighted
it was a mistake. That's a mistake.
A mistake, yeah. So the fact that we're highlighting that this was a mistake, and then we're in
But our
more
hands are
beyond, and right, our hands are tied, and it's beyond a political frenzy. I think it's valid to say that this is a crisis.
You may not know this answer, and it may be unfair of me to ask, but you're all I got right now, Hillary, and all our viewers have. What is Congress, politicians, we're hearing about the leader from Maryland, what should their role be in this? This feels like he is just moving with impunity and is ignoring the Supreme Court of the United States. What are the potential next steps here?
Right, and I'm so glad you brought this up, because I think what I can respond to that is that we are hearing from Democratic lawmakers, but again, going back to that same, our hands are tied.
Yeah.
I mean, Democratic lawmakers, traveled to El Salvador to advocate for Mr. Garcia's release. We heard from Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen also visiting El Salvador, meeting with Garcia and calling for his immediate release. But yeah, we're also hearing from President Bukele, dismissing U.S. demands for Abrego Garcia's return, asserting that the matter concerns a Salvadoran resident falls outside U.S. jurisdiction. So this all in all, yes, we're hearing from certain lawmakers, but this puts a strain on the relationship, diplomatic relationships between U.S. and El Salvador.
And to bring it home to Chicago, our city, the city of Big Shoulders, has one of the largest Salvadoran populations in the Midwest. What are you hearing from immigrant rights groups or humans, immigrants who are living here? What must the level of fear right now be that you can literally be, for lack of a nicer term, yanked from your car on the way to work or to the store and transported to a country from which you ran for fear of persecution, that we agreed was the case back in 2019? What's the temperature right now? That's got to be a level of fear and trauma that's just unbearable.
Right, and it's great that you acknowledge that. I mean, this raises significant concerns for sure about the due process for U.S. residents and green card holders. I think right now what we're seeing from immigrant advocates, local immigrant advocates in Chicago, is that it's time to step in. I mean, we're hearing from the Resurrection Project of just spreading as much information as we can with Know Your Rights workshops, because through information comes empowerment. So this is just brief, but I think, as you mentioned, there is that fear, and I think only we can suppress that fear is through facts and information.
Absolutely. And on that note, you will be back. I'm telling you now, this is important to us. Borderless is a fantastic partner. You are a fantastic representative. So we will be back. We will continue to have these conversations because I think, to your point, it is important that we continue to amplify and have folks who are embedded, bringing us accurate information, because we want to move with urgency but not panic. And we all have fear, but we've got to find a way to move through that fear in spite of, do it anyway. So Hillary Flores, I cannot thank you enough for being here today.
Darrious.
First visit.
It's a blessing.
It's a
thank
blessing
you.
right back at you. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
On the other side of a short break, I'll be joined by our roundtable regulars to look at the impending government-generated storm on the horizon for nonprofits, as well as which political leaders might be running for what in the next election cycle. Stay with us.
CAN TV is the lens through which Chicago's stories are told, harnessing the unifying power of community television. With CAN TV On Demand, immerse yourself in the richness of our city through exclusive stories and programs tailored just for you, connecting you to the heartbeats of our streets, the voices of our people, and the spirit that makes Chicago unique. Discover the strength of your community on CAN TV On Demand.
This week on the Roundtable, we're diving into a trio of topics that could shape both the national and local political landscape in the months to come. First, growing concern is spreading across the nonprofit sector amid speculation that the Trump administration may be preparing a sweeping crackdown on nonprofit organizations, especially those focused on civil rights, immigration, and progressive policy work. What could an attack on the nonprofit infrastructure mean for the millions of Americans who rely on these services? Then shifting to state politics, there's buzz in Springfield and beyond. Will Governor J.B. Pritzker campaign for a third term? His national profile has grown, and so has the speculation. Meanwhile, all eyes are also on Senator Dick Durbin, who's nearing the end of his fifth term. Will Illinois senior senator seek a sixth term, or will we see a changing of the guard? Joining us today to unpack these issues are my roundtable regulars, my good friends, Sufyan Sohel, who is the chair of the Cook County Commission on Human Rights, and Swathi Staley, partner at Just Act Partners. Family, welcome back.
Thanks for having us.
Let's dive in. Here we go.
Where to start?
Let's start with our president's current efforts. What indicators are we seeing that are suggesting a coordinated attack is imminent within the nonprofit space? Sufyan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to reiterate and keep reiterating, this is all part of systemic attacks
Flood the
against
zone.
all Americans. And not even flooding, I think, pointed in how do we stop work being done that go against our technical policies that he's pushing out there. So we already saw funding freezes. We already saw that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think we need to be better about saying those words out loud so people question why those are so problematic words.
Sure.
But words like justice and equity, and if there's a list that's being circulated of if you apply for any federal grants, having
And there
any of
actually
these
is a
100,
list.
that you will be denied your federal grant. And these are words that most of us use or want to use in our everyday rhetoric and in the work that we're doing to make the world a better place. But I'm going to take a sidestep. A lot of nonprofits exist because of the gaps created by government structures, right? Like how do we feed all of our hungry? How do we house all of our houseless? How do we fight for civil rights and equity and equality and provide legal care to those who can't afford a legal support? And nonprofits are filling all these gaps. So by targeting these specific nonprofits who are working on these policies that the government may go against, you're harming millions of Americans around the country. So now if we dig deeper, which policy? So we're talking about civil rights, as you mentioned. We could touch upon LGBTQ rights. We could talk about women's reproductive health and healthcare. We could talk about civil rights. You talk about Palestine, protests, anyone protecting First Amendments, right? All these civil rights orgs. Immigration. We've been hearing rumors of climate justice, climate advocacy, environmental protections, right? A lot of these things which most of us, I think, would think are no-brainers that we need to protect in our country are, for some reason, I mean, not for some reason, for real reasons, things that the Trump administration is vehemently opposed to, and he will be targeting those organizations. And what does that look like? It means federal funding being frozen. We have to start exploring other ways of raising money. And I see a lot of nonprofits that we work with who are thinking strategically of what that looks like. But for others, especially smaller ones, that means total collapse and shutdown of their organizations. It means then having the director of the IRS send letters like, hey, we're going to audit your financial statements. And if you are doing any work that goes against these policies, where there's a potential you may risk your 501c3 status.
And the strange irony of that is, in the world that I like to live in, human rights work, immigration work are things that you're proud of, and you're banting and you're putting it in your work and you're saying this is what we're doing.
Proud of.
And with impunity, they're saying you can't even say the words. Swathi, Sufyan touched on it. We're a nonprofit organization. How should nonprofits, big, small, or otherwise, be girding their loins right now on what is more than likely the next step in a series of coordinated attacks?
Well, gird their loins, they must.
They must.
Nonprofits right now are seeing an incredible assault on their ability to operate. And, the beauty of the NGO sector of our economy is that they're the catch-all for so many issues that the government either just is not able to address, or they're not a trusted partner to be able to actually address the issue. And so it needs to be more hyper-local, community-focused work that just is now being assailed. And so, I've seen a number of nonprofits seek support from private philanthropy to try to fill the funding gaps with USAID that was effectively disbanded. There's now threats to Head Start and early Head Start funding. Organizations that are doing foundational work, setting kids up for success so they have an equal playing field, are now feeling the wrath. And the issue that we have within the nonprofit sector, I think, is that giving has not grown significantly in 30 plus years, right? It's always been about 2% of GDP across the country. And that is not enough to solve the problem. It's a Band-Aid. And so to expect now private philanthropy, family foundations to be able to fill the gap of this massive funding shortfall is is somewhat of a fool's errand, but it's the only pathway that a lot of nonprofits have to be able to fill the gaps, to continue to do the work that is so important to hold up communities and support millions and millions of Americans across the country.
I had a thought that woke me up at 2:00 in the morning on this issue. And it doesn't feel outside of the realm of possibility. Let's say, legality notwithstanding, this occurs. Nonprofits have their 501c3 taken away, and folks go, I'm going to support them anyway. And then the IRS goes, we'll be looking at your giving. Where does this end? And it feels like, and tell me if my perception is correct, it is creating fear of any movement. If we shut you down here, then we'll shame you or make you feel bad if you support it in another way. Is that by design, or am I just imagining things at 2 a.m?
No, I think you're not imagining things. Swathi and actually were having the very same conversation back in the green room of, we've already seen this towards the attacks on law firms, right?
Yes.
You represent
Yes.
our political opponents. We are going to come after you, right? And now, what's to stop them from saying, you funded our political opponents? This is all public information.
Yes.
We are going to come after you. We're going to target you. I think this is all part of a grand design of, let's push as many buttons all simultaneously to see which ones we can go with, which ones we cannot go with. And I am seeing, unfortunately, too many individuals, businesses, law firms, nonprofits who are cowering.
Readily.
And they're trying to protect themselves.
Almost
and I get that.
preemptively.
Yeah,
Okay.
preemptively.
And we certainly understand, but...
But it's now's the time not to do that, not to focus on risk aversion, but resilience building. How do we protect ourselves moving forward? Who do we need to coalesce with? Who do we need? What? As a proud former board member of CAN-TV, I think we thought of, all right, our funding streams are going to change. How do we diversify, right? How do we make sure that we can continue the operations of our organizations? More and more need to do that. But I think the fear is, if you challenge our system, we're going to come after you.
Aggressively.
And people don't know. They're trying to protect themselves.
Absolutely. Let's move on to our next topic. We'll be back on the first topic, I'm sure, in the days and weeks to come. But Governor Pritzker, our governor, as Swathi said here last week on the show, he hasn't confirmed a third term run yet, but his national presence, including a very impressive interview in the Lion's Den called Fox News, it continues to grow. Do you think that makes all of what's happening, the trade missions, does that make it more or less likely he's going to run for a third term?
Well, it's certainly looking like he is primed to be a national candidate. He has the poise and the gravitas, I think, to really be able to represent.
And the no F's to give.
And the no F's to give, truly. I mean, he really is. He has lost patience for BS and is really at the point of speaking his mind, but he has a unique ability of many of the candidates that are being floated for a potential presidential run that has the ability to really convey their message in a very effective way, especially in a hostile environment. As there was there was no expectation that his appearance on Fox News would have been a wild success, but to be able to deliver the points that he was able to do in somewhat hostile territory really shows the ability for him to reach across the aisle and be able to be an effective communicator, which I think right now there is such a lack of effective communication that I think that he absolutely has the ability to make a strong showing. Now, I think personally that Illinois still needs him as governor because I think we have been able to really protect a lot of the rights that are being diminished nationally because of his strong leadership. However, I think his star continues to rise.
Is this a yes and?
I think it's a yes and.
Okay, got it.
It's
Sufyan.
a yes and. I think he's ready for it if he
And this
he
is a great
chooses to do it.
platform that
It's
he's
a
using
great
incredibly
platform.
well. Okay.
I mean, his moves aren't random, right? They are.
No. He doesn't
there's
strike me as
something-
random.
No,
Okay.
I mean, some of us are random,
Yeah.
myself included,
Pick a day.
all the time,
Pick a
right?
day.
And but he's setting the stage for something bigger. I'm concerned a little bit that we know him well in Illinois, but his national presence may not be that same outside the Midwest, and there's other governors who may have a stronger presence. And I think he definitely will run for re-election because he can still be governor if he loses the presidential race 2 years later. But as we're going to talk about in the next question as well, is how does that look to who's going to fill this gap? Say he runs for governor and then runs for president. Do we have someone strong then to take his place as lieutenant governor to fill those last 2 years, or what's that process look like? And
Or
if he doesn't run, who's going to take his space? Like, what's this shuffling of Illinois going to look like?
Or if we move on to whether or not Senator Durbin, senior senator from the great state of Illinois, will seek a sixth term, one of the fairly out front from all indications that we're seeing in the media is that the lieutenant governor is one of the folks circling around that. So I'm going to ask the same question. Be a prognosticator. What is the chance that Senator Durbin, 80-year-old Senator Durbin, is going to run for a sixth term? Percentage.
I'm going to go 50-50.
Okay.
And I'm copping out right now on that.
We know.
I think the chances are low. I don't believe that I don't think he'll run for another term.
And he's only raised about 42,000,
43,000, I think, in the first quarter.
That's telling.
That's very telling. Money is everything. And do I think that if he sought re-election, he could win? Absolutely. However, I do think he, of all leaders, I think sees the writing on the wall, and that his age and his tenure we need to be thinking to the future at some point. And so I think that the chances of him running again is low. Though he's done an incredible service for the state of Illinois in his 5 terms.
That's where I get stuck at the 50-50 is that he's such a central figure in the United States Senate and has power, respect across the aisles. And if I was in that position, I would really be struggling to think do they need me? Do my people need me right now in this role? Because you bring someone in who's untested in the national stage, will they have that same gravitas? Will they have that same influence? Is that going to shift?
But with respect, we look at what happened with, and I'm not suggesting this at all, but he is 80 years old.
100%.
Great health notwithstanding, 80 is 80. And we watch what happened with, what was it, Feinstein? We're watching what's happening with, I'm not even going to say the name, the other person who froze on camera, the Republican. So he may be thinking of that as well. We just watched this happen with the shift from President Biden to Vice President Harris. So I would imagine all those things are impacting. A poll came out already because there is an on-deck circle.
Polls for everything.
And I guess I was a bit surprised that Lauren Underwood polls higher than Lieutenant Governor Stratton. What does that surprise you? Is it early? I know it's early.
It's still early, but Congresswoman Underwood is an exceptionally dynamic leader. She has really made waves on the national stage. And is beloved locally. So
and she's not the easiest geography where she holds office.
True. In the western south and southwestern suburbs, it's pretty incredible her polling numbers. But I will say it is, to your point, it is still early. But she's an exceptionally dynamic leader, and I think one to watch.
And apparently wants it.
It came as somewhat of surprising news to me. I didn't realize that was an ambition of hers. But whether it's Lieutenant Governor Stratton or Congresswoman Underwood, I think we've got some dynamic women who are potentially
Robin
incredible
Kelly's
candidates.
in that mix as well.
I'm getting my
Congresswoman
popcorn ready to see
Kelly.
who
I
all
know. It's going to be
to
an
your
interesting.
point, right? I think people also want change, and Lauren Underwood really represents this young, energetic, really progressive view that we haven't seen on national stage. And the way
as always, I enjoy our time together. This is why we do this, to have these conversations. Why are you laughing at me? I'm giving you a compliment.
No, thank you.
Sufyan, Sohel, Swathi, Staley, thank you all very much. I'll probably see you again next week, so until then, thank you.
Thank you.
On the other side of a break, I'll be joined by the co-founders of reCentered Partners to discuss organizational efficiency in these times of uncertainty. Stay with us.
Hi, Hi, I'm financial expert Tamara Durbin, inviting you to join me each week for In the Money, the show that makes money management approachable and enjoyable. Join the conversation at 7 p.m. exclusively on CAN TV Cable Channel 19 or stream live on cantv.org or on the CAN TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling, experience the power of community television.
In an era marked by rapid change, political volatility, and economic uncertainty, the success of any organization, whether public, private, or nonprofit, hinges on its ability to be both effective and agile. The most resilient organizations aren't just those with the biggest budgets or longest legacies. They're the ones that can adapt quickly, lead with clarity, and stay focused on mission even as the ground shifts beneath them. This week, we're joined by two leading voices in the field of organizational effectiveness, experts who have helped institutions large and small sharpen their strategies, build strong internal cultures, and navigate the complexities of change. As uncertainty becomes the new normal, we ask, what does it truly take for organizations to stay nimble, stay grounded, and stay ahead? Helping to unpack the tools, mindsets, and leadership approaches needed to not only survive, but to thrive in this moment are the co-founders of reCentered Partners, Christine Leung and Dr. Sufyan McClain. How are you both?
Excellent. We're so happy to be here.
It's great to have you here. I'm big fans of your work. And right now, to be able to share this conversation with our viewers means the world. We're all, no matter where we are, I keep saying we're all impacted. No matter who you voted for, we're all in the find out phase together. So my first question, in this political and social climate, it's becoming increasingly more hostile to people of color, LGBTQ plus individuals. What are the biggest challenges that the leaders you're talking to are facing right now? Stefan, I'll start with you.
Actually, I'll pass it to Christine.
We'll go over to you.
Yeah, I mean, can I say everything?
Yes. Yes.
Well, so here in the city of Chicago, it's a polarized climate here in the city locally. And then we're also obviously dealing with some erraticness nationwide as well, right?
By design.
And by design without a plan. And as strategic planners by trade and as organizational designers by trade and leadership developers by trade, we are sometimes not wired to think and move in times that are feeling so chaotic, where we don't know the guardrails, or we don't know like the foundation.
We get vapor locked. We go there.
Yeah.
Okay.
We love our plans.
Yes, we do.
For good reason.
Yes,
right?
agreed.
And like the best leaders can navigate a plan and anticipate risks and adjust. But when we have to adjust every day for these things that we didn't even realize were on the table that we would need to adjust for.
That were never on our bingo cards.
That's hard.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we keep hearing from leaders is that it is really hard to know where their people are. So like there's this external uncertainty, but the internal uncertainty is what leaders are really feeling as well. So not knowing where their people are, how they're feeling, what they're navigating on a day-to-day basis, at work, at home, et cetera, existentially, we've heard is a big challenge for leaders right now.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And so speaking of that, because there's so much, we've talked about this, I think, at dinner, so much unprocessed trauma from the pandemic. And then when you add people of color, LGBTQIA plus folks, you're adding
Women,
historic,
immigrants.
and add to the list. So you're adding layers and layers upon trauma. Compounded trauma.
Yes.
So as leaders, if you sit with me and other leaders, what are some practical strategies that organizations, but driven by the leadership, what are some of the practical strategies that we can implement to make sure that where they are all over the place emotionally, how can we support our employees? What are some of those strategies?
This is such an important question, and I think there are 3 strategies that we are employing with our partners. The first is to create structures for listening. And Christine just mentioned that it's so important to know where our people are. How are they feeling? How are they doing, right? So that we can respond appropriately. So structures such as our one-on-one meetings or our team meetings, this is the time to double down on those efforts as opposed to removing them,
So the
right?
consistency of the intervention.
Absolutely. We want to center humanity. We want people to feel seen and heard, right? And we want to use that data to help us as leaders pivot, adjust, and signal to our folks that we care for them. The second strategy that we're really supporting leaders to employ is naming the moment. Neutral or silence is not neutrality, right? And so it's important that we actually have a perspective, even if we don't know, right? It's okay to say we don't know, but it's important for us to name what's happening, how it's impacting our org, and where we are in the process of maybe finding our footing. So we want to name the moment. We don't want to be silent. And this is a perfect opportunity for us to actually maybe repeat back what we're hearing, right, from our people. The last thing that we really believe in is meeting people with what they need, sharing resources, right? So this is the perfect time for organizations, if they have employee assistance programs for mental health or health in general, to employ those. Really help people find what they need in the moment to show up at their best.
Got it. We say uncertainty, we say crises, and it feels overused, but I don't know better words to describe where we are. They just really are what they are. If I were to say right now, can you help with a profile of traits and qualities that a leader should tap into, or that if you were looking for a leader to lead an organization at a time such as this, what would the traits and qualities look like?
Yep. Well, one thing that I want to say really quickly before I answer your question, Darrious, is that we oftentimes talk about leaders as a certain set of people. But during times of change and crises, there's opportunities for anyone to lean in and lead, right? In big and small ways. And those are so important and so impactful right now. Like, people want to feel connection. They want to feel inspired. They want to feel like there are other people that like understand them and see them. And so when we talk about leaders, yes, we are talking about leadership teams and executive teams of organizations, big and small, all different sizes. But also we think about people that find themselves in positions or moments where they could step up, lean in, connect, support, et cetera. And I think especially right now, that is equally as important. We think we can all name someone in a leadership position that failed to lead in a moment. We can probably each name someone that wasn't in a position of power.
Who stepped into the moment. Yes, sir.
And look at what that just did to your own body language. Feeling that and experiencing those moments right now when things feel so erratic and so disconnected and ungrounded can be just as powerful. So I didn't answer your question.
Give me that profile.
I think there's definitely authenticity, right? I think it's an overused term. Stefan talked about remembering and connecting to our own humanity and the humanity of others. Sometimes we work, like I've been this leader in moments too. I feel like we all potentially have been, and where you feel like you have to be a certain thing, right? Or like say a certain thing or know something specific.
Or not say a certain thing.
Yes. And that's performative, right? And I think we know that there are spaces for that. Sometimes you have to put on a certain persona, but again, in moments where, like this, if you want to call it a crisis, or how chaotic it is, or how erratic at best, probably.
Give it a name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Say it
Name
out
the
loud.
moment.
Name the moment.
Name it.
So it's
You don't
okay
need
as
to
a
be
leader
perfect.
to go, this is a hot mess.
This
we
is
all know
hard
that.
for me.
Yes,
right?
this is difficult.
Yes.
And what I'm hearing from you all, it is, and I heard it from the earlier, from some of our other guests tonight, it is naming the moment, but then not just hovering there, but going, here are scenarios of how we address it.
That's
We
right.
don't know which one yet.
Together.
But together,
Yes.
we can do this.
Yep.
Yes.
I love this. So it's rapid change.
Yes.
We're getting, nonprofits, no matter where you are in this, getting calls that your roles have dramatically changed. Funding is taken away. We had Dara Munson on from Family Focus 2 weeks ago. Head Start dollars in jeopardy, which impacts so much of the important work that they do. So decision making is becoming challenging. It was always challenging because but it's even more challenging. So what advice are you giving the leaders you're working with on how, if there are tools or tricks to make clear, confident decisions in abstract uncertainty?
So I want to go back to something you said earlier, that the chaos is by design.
Absolutely.
And so part of our resistance to the chaos is to actually slow down. I like to say that urgency is the enemy of equity and inclusion, specifically in decision making. And so we want to slow down, and we want to actually assess what is the best course to take. And we know that includes first involving folks who are often marginalized, folks who may have historically been left out of decisions. We want to center them. We want to explain to them how we are going to engage them in this decision-making process. And that could
ask how they want to be engaged.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And next, we want to engage them in a fair process. We want to take them through this process together. We want to design with and not for. And so in this moment, those kind of key strategies, I think, will really help ground us and sustain us for the months, the years ahead. There's one more thing that we often leave off, and that is kind of naming the trade-offs.
There's always a trade-off.
There's always a trade-off, and there is no perfect decision. And so we want to be clear as we're communicating with our interest groups, our stakeholders. This is where we're landing, and because of this is what we prioritize. This is where we press pause. This is how it's grounded in our values as an organization, and this is what will be different. So those are kind of three, I would say, top strategies for decision making during this climate.
I love that. Final question. As you were talking about the months and weeks and years,
yes,
and every month feels like a year. So, what advice would you give to leaders, all leaders, who want to build resilience within their teams while staying committed to equity and justice when both words are being told to us they are horrible things that should not be said out loud?
Crazy, right?
Yes, name it.
Stefan and I talk a lot about how in moments of chaos and crisis is when leadership either shows up or falls down.
Agreed.
Right. Because you can kind of hold things together when you can kind of follow a plan or kind of follow past practice or just kind of go by your habits that you already have established without really thinking about them too much. And again, as we've talked about, we can't really do that right now because so much is changing. And so where we love to support leaders and love to see leaders and leadership teams thrive is when their vision, their mission, their strategy is aligned on a day-to-day behavioral level basis with their values. So what they need to get done, what they're hoping to get done, what they plan to get done, what they're prioritizing to get done, they're also aligning their habits, how they're using time, how they're interacting with one another, creating intentional spaces together, one-on-ones, team meetings, all staff meetings, community events where that really bring out live out the values that they have on their website.
Got it. This is a perfect endpoint for our first of hopefully many conversations.
Yes.
You've been with us before, Dr. Stephan. Christine, it's good to finally get you in the chair. She is a reticent sometimes public performer, but so talented. So we've got to, right now, as you said yourself, we've got to get the leaders in front of as many people as possible because we need everybody on deck. So thank you for both of your talents.
Thank you for having us.
We appreciate it.
Thanks
We'll
for
have you
having
back.
us.
On the other side of the break, we'll talk leadership during uncertainty with notable leaders Christa Hamilton, Kelwin Harris, and Monica Woodson. Stay with us.
I'm Ricky Watson, and I'm inviting you to join me for the new CAN TV original program, Critical Conversations. Each month, I'll share space with special guests who, like you and me, are on their journey of self-discovery and deeper understanding. Join the conversation on CAN TV, cable channel 19, or stream live on cantv.org or on the CAN TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
In an era marked by political volatility, economic uncertainty, and growing social pressure, leadership is being tested like never before, whether it's navigating public expectations, internal cultural shifts, or external market disruptions. Today's CEOs and executive leaders are being called to lead with clarity, resilience, and purpose. But what does that really look like in practice? This week, we're joined by an incredible trio of leaders who are doing just that, guiding their teams and organizations through uncertain terrain, while holding firm to the values, mission, and long-term vision. We'll explore what it takes to lead with intention when the future feels anything but certain, and how leadership itself is evolving in response to these challenges. Christa Hamilton, CEO and President of UCAN, Kelwin Harris, Deputy Assessor, Chief Civic Engagement Officer, Cook County Assessor's Office, and Monica Woodson, CEO, Girl Scouts of Southeastern Michigan. Welcome to the newsroom, Monica. Welcome back, Christa and Kelwin. And speaking about leadership in real time, as Christa Hamilton, CEO of one of the largest venerable social service organizations in this city, in real time just got an announcement that federal funding has been cut, which will impact 2 human lives.
Yep, absolutely. So we just few minutes ago, just got an email that effective today, we are losing $200,000 for victims advocates. So those, that is the money that we use to support staff that go out and support victims of community violence.
And let me see if I have this right. You found out today and it's effective now, right?
Yeah.
Now. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Yep. So clearly this conversation, I hate that we have such a great example, but leading in times like this, what qualities do you think matter most right now as we're all dealing with this? And how have you evolved your own leadership style to meet this unprecedented, unimaginable, uncertain moment? Christa, I'll continue with you.
I think first, for me, I've probably had to double down on empathy more than normal with my staff and not just the clients. You know, as you just mentioned, $200,000 is 2 staff lives that may be impacted. So, you know, understanding what they're going through, and outside of work, the pressures of the environment are impacted them.
Because you'll be leaving here and on your way to Springfield. I'm telling all your business.
You're telling all my business. Yeah, I'm leaving here and going to do some advocacy work tomorrow in Springfield.
Yes.
So I'm rushing
Yes,
there now,
yes.
As you can imagine. But yes, empathy, I think, has to become to the forefront, and then resilience. You know, we are going to still stay steadfast through adversity, but we got to make sure we have our bounce back together.
Come on.
Because that is what is going to lead us throughout the next couple of years.
Got it. Kelwin, what say you?
Yeah, thanks for having me back, first of all.
It's a pleasure
to be here. You know, definitely tough times. I think about Michelle Obama when she said, when they go low, we go high. I almost feel like when they go low, we also go local.
I go atomic, but okay, go on. I'm sorry, but you go ahead.
We all feel atomic
okay, you go ahead.
at this point, but I feel like we also go local,
Local.
right? You know, it's the time for me particularly working in county government, where I'm heartened in a sense. There's so much chaos going on, but thankful really be living in a blue state. You think about the leadership that we have, Governor Pritzker pushing back. You've heard Mayor Johnson on Capitol Hill, fighting for sanctuary city status. And then locally in county government, yes, I mean, there certainly are threats, particularly to the public health system. A lot of the county budget revolves around public health and hospitals, certainly in jeopardy. With my team personally, certainly the culture and just kind of the vibe, right, is different. But we haven't fortunately had to have any cuts or anything like that. Certainly bracing for that kind of stuff. But right now, fingers crossed, that's been pretty steady. I do serve, and I heard your previous segments on a couple of nonprofit boards, and they're definitely directly impacted. I serve on the board of the Historic Pullman Foundation that supports investments in Pullman and the National Park Service, the monument there. They've seen some cuts, and then higher backs, and then cut again. So there's all this kind of like back and forth chaos. And then also I serve on the board of the McClain Challenge that supports public engagement, civic engagement among young people, and looking for alternative sources of funding as well right now. So I think last time I was here, we were here about a quarter ago when the year first started, and you were asking like what's going to be the word for the year, and for me it was scrappy, and I think we're continuing to see that having to do more with less, operate in an environment of uncertainty, and it's concerning.
Agreed. Monica, what say you?
So for us, it's a combination of focus, of being nimble, of being a little fearless, and saying, okay, here's the thing, how do we navigate our way through it, but how do we remain true to what the goals are? And we're in a unique position in that we don't receive federal funding, but we are impacted because people are going to have less discretionary dollars. So do I register my girl for Girl Scouts? Do I buy groceries? And so we are not, the uncertainty is the same for us, but it's different in many ways because it's going to hit us in different ways. And so my team is we talk a lot. We are emphasizing self-care. We are emphasizing taking the time that you need to make sure that you are taking care of you, because we got work to do. And we don't have time for burnout. So it's going to be a bumpy ride, and we anticipate that. But
Kelwin, as specific as you can, because there are viewers at home, other leaders. We're all kind of going through this, doing the, when anyone asks me how are you doing, the best I can.
That's right.
The absolute best I can. Some bests are better than others, but so help me as a proxy for our viewers, because you and I have spoken, and I have great respect for you and your boss. The county assessor was just here a few weeks ago and has great respect for you. So you're doing something that's right. So what specific as you can be strategies are you using that you have found most effective to intentionally help your teams stay focused, motivated, managing stress on the job? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, for me, fortunately I have a team that they get it and they're frontline workers. So, I lead our civic engagement department, and that's our outreach team. So they're kind of, boots on the ground soldiers going into communities. They see firsthand what the challenges are. And our work is around the property tax system. So there couldn't be a more bread and butter issue than that. You've got people that are seeing their, 401k shrinking. I've heard people say 401ks turning into 201ks. You're seeing, people just kind of, panicking about groceries, things like that. And then to add the tax burden on top of that, we want to make sure that, people have all the resources, all the savings they qualify for. So fortunately, it's almost like, the current challenges and urgency, right, has really gotten people already fired up. And so we go out. Now what we are seeing, and I've heard, some of your previous segments today, a lot of people in communities are afraid to even come out of their homes, because they think we're going to be, while we're taking that information for exemptions and homeowners exemption, we're also going to be sharing this information with ICE.
And that's done by design
people.
too, I think.
There's this fear.
We're getting the help.
There's this sense of fear. So what we're doing is doubling down. We've got, we've hired, ramped up, really tripled our bilingual staff. We're doing more events online, Facebook Live events, educational events, so people can, if they choose to stay at home. But we're telling people, we're not checking any of this stuff. We're here to provide resources. Yeah. So I think, when people look at my team looks at the universe of what's going on out there, and we're them also. We're property owners in Cook County. Yeah. So my team certainly gets it. But I think it's having those opportunities again. Being in Cook County, being in an environment that is welcoming to sharing this kind of information. I think it's sort of self-motivating in a sense.
One of the challenges I think we all have, I can certainly attest to it, is wanting in times like these to give your team clear and transparent communication, but determining what's just heavy should be the heads that wear the crown. So what is your litmus test? How do you, Christa, I'm going to start with you. How do you balance wanting to be transparent and clear, but not just overwhelm the staff doing yeoman's work? Where's that balance? What does it look like? And how might it be different than it was even 2 years ago?
Yeah, because there's so much uncertainty, it's not a lot we can clearly communicate. But what we do, so I do quarterly town hall meetings with my team. So we've already had one for last quarter. We're gearing up for one now. I meet with my smaller team of leaders on a more frequent basis. And we're just telling them what we know. Right? We're saying, hey, this is what this is where we are today, and this is what we plan to do. So we talked to them about those contingency plans. We talked to what we just finished strategic planning last year. This was not on our strategic plan, as you can imagine. But we talked about, what parts of the plan that we're going to go forth and continue to move forward on, what parts we're going to pause. And right now we're in maintenance phase. So we're trying to maintain the things that we have, and we're communicating. So when I leave this stage today, I'll be sending out a communication. This happened. What does this mean for the team? So as honest as I can possibly be without creating too much fear for the teams, because that's not going to be helpful to anyone. So we are communicating as quick as we get information, but also trying to have solutions and plans before we disseminate it.
Got it. Kelwin, Monica, similar, different approaches?
Very similar, very similar. We also finished our strategic plan last year, so we're managing expectations around implementation. What are some things that we can implement now? What are some things that we can put a pause on? We're also maintaining that transparency and saying, look, this is what's going on. We've got multiple budget scenarios, but we need you to look at your departments. We're not talking to the frontline staff just yet, but we're talking to our directors and the layer just below the chief level, and we're saying, look at your departments. Where can we streamline some efficiencies, which is a strategic priority. So it's keeping in line, but just trying to be honest, because people are going to hear, right? Yeah. They're going to hear, and rumors are going to get started.
And a key part of it for us is revisiting our mission. And a key part of our mission, and a central part, is equity. And we know the word equity is being scrubbed out of everything right now, but doubling down on that, and educating people, putting the work that we're doing and reforming the property tax system in the context of this lineage of, repairing racial harm that's gone on for so long. And so we have this series called Racial Equity in Real Estate that we're really doubling down on, bringing in voices from really all over the country to talk about, how do we solve this issue. For Black and brown people, most of their wealth is in their home. And it's so unfortunate when you're in a position where you see people that are afraid of losing their home on top of everything that's going on. So we're doubling down on that.
I enjoy, our viewers, I'm sure, enjoy having you all here. Monica, who has great ties to Chicago, it's great to have a leader from Michigan. We have similarities and differences, but thank you for joining in this. We're all sort of in this together, and as much cover and confirmation as we can give each other, so that we can continue to do this important work. It's more important now than ever. So Monica Woodson, Kelwin, my brother, my friend, the DJ, and Christa, thank you so much for being here as always. You all will be back in the next quarter when it's time to have another kitchen table. Maybe you can come back in and visit us.
Happy to do it.
We accept?
We accept.
Okay,
yes.
Great. And thank you, Chicago, for tuning in. That's our time for now. Andy's back in the host chair next week for an all-new edition of Chicago Newsroom 2.0. Until then, in spite of it all, be well and well-informed.